Chapter 51 Canary Wharf Riders and the New Term. You are listening at Novelful.audio. The Hogwarts train runs on the tracks. Harry and the others are not on the train. Hermione searched every compartment, but couldn't find Harry and Ron. Hearing this, John put down the chocolate frog in his mouth. He thought for a while, maybe he missed the train. Maybe I missed the train. It's not a big deal. Just write to the school and they will send someone to pick it up. Putting the chocolate frog in his mouth, John looked at Neville. Since Neville visited his parents during the holidays, he has been a little depressed. Neville, are you all right? He asked Neville, and Neville froze for a moment, nodded and said, I'm fine, John. It's fine, there's toffee here, do you want to eat it? Stuffing the taffy into Neville's hands, John thought of Neville's parents, the injuries caused by the curse. The unforgivable curse. Thinking of the Cruciatus curse he had used before, he felt that it would be better if he used it less. Thinking about it, John's thoughts drifted out of the window. He saw a black dot approaching, and John froze. He rubbed his eyes, as if to reconfirm what he saw in doubt. A familiar flying car passed by at high speed beside the Hogwarts train, and screams came from inside. Mr. Wick, you are flying in the wrong direction. Not that is falling. John watched helplessly as the flying car plunged across the whole bridge the train had passed and disappeared. He said to himself, I seem to have seen my father just now. If he read correctly, there were 3 people in the flying car just now, Harry, Ron and their father Watson Wick. His expression was a little stiff. John didn't expect his father to be so bold as to dare to drive a speeding car. Did he think it was the same thing as a car? I can only pray that Harry and Ron can have a whole body. John folded his hands in prayer, leaving Hermione confused. What? Canary Wharf car god. Forgot to tell you, there are more boats than cars. Glancing at Hermione, who was restless, John was very considerate and forgot what happened just now. Hermione, don't worry, Harry and the others will be fine. After finishing speaking, John silently added a sentence in his heart, probably. Thank you, John. Hermione also felt that she was too nervous. Harry and the others wouldn't be so stupid that they wouldn't write a letter to the school, right? Harry and Ron regretted why they should trust this seemingly very reliable adult. John, Ron was so frightened that he yelled John's name crazily. He felt that only John could save them and stop this crazy uncle. Harry had hit his head on the roof of the car for the 10th time, and the material of this car was really good, so it didn't break. Of course, Harry's head would probably fail sooner. Compared to the 2 of them, Watson was very excited. I saw him holding the steering wheel with one hand, and the speed of the car soared to mph with just a slight move. Long live the Canary Wharf car god. With a cheer, mixed with 2 weak and helpless screams, they went too far. The second year is not like the first year entering Hogwarts from the Black Lake, but a different place. On the muddy path outside Hogsmeade Station, carriages without horses were waiting in sequence. At a glance, there are at least 100 carriages here. A carriage without horses makes this thing full of weirdness. What pulls this car? Hermione was curious. She and John were in the same carriage. It's Thestrals, a magical creature. John stared at the Thestrals in front of the carriage, and he remembered this species, which seemed to be seen only by facing death. Could it be Quirrell? Remembering that he saw Quirrell's body taken away by Voldemort with his own eyes, John suddenly realized a carriage can seat 4 people. After Neville got into the carriage, the blonde girl got in before Ernie Macmillan. Hi John, long time no see. Although trying to pretend not to be deliberate, Daphne's behavior of snatching the carriage still exposed her purpose. John smiled and greeted her when he saw her. Although he was in the same house, he had very little communication with other Slytherins, except for Malfoy and the 2 attendants. Daphne was the one who talked the most. Well, the total did not exceed 10 sentences. Hermione saw Daphne, and immediately felt a feeling of natural hostility. A woman's intuition is so unreasonable. Hermione glared at Daphne, and Daphne flicked her hair proudly. Her blonde hair seemed like satin in the night sky. Neville felt that the air seemed to be getting colder. Could it be because it was night? The inside of the carriage was dark, with a faint musty and straw smell. After all the students got on the bus, 100 carriages lined up and headed for Hogwarts along the dirt path. the Thestral carriage was pulling towards Hogwarts. After approaching the main entrance, John saw winged boars on the main entrances on both sides. Enter the main entrance, follow the uphill driveway, and finally arrive at the stone steps of the oak gate at the entrance of Hogwarts Castle. The students entered the auditorium from here, and soon the first-year students carried by the black ship also entered it. Hermione still didn't see Harry and Ron, and she was a little uneasy that John was also sitting at the Slytherin table. Malfoy saw that John was going to sit there, but Daphne directly snatched the seat next to John. "This is my place." Malfoy vented his dissatisfaction. Daphne glanced at him, the meaning in her eyes was already very clear. "Let me go away." "Ahem, maybe changing the position will give you a better view." Thinking of Daphne's pure-blood family that was as old as himself, he swore that he was just too gentlemanly. Malfoy changed direction and sat opposite John, and John said to him, "Draco, you've grown taller." "Really, I also think I am a lot taller." "How much taller?" Malfoy was really happy to mention this matter. To be honest, his height has never been able to support his aura. He always felt that if he was as tall as John, he would definitely be able to overwhelm the annoying Scarhead Potter. John stretched out his hand and gestured a lot, then shrunk to the height of 2 fingers after thinking about it, and said, "About that much." In addition, John is also taller, about 2 fingers, but Malfoy was very happy, and he told John about his great plans for this semester. "My dad promised to donate a batch of Nimbus 2001 to the team. When I become a Seeker, we will definitely be able to play against Porter." Inhumane. Malfoy's super double directly turned the Slytherin team into a landlord. What John didn't expect was that Malfoy was really playing through the back door. "I don't think it's necessary to go through the back door in the second year with your skills. One thing to say, Malfoy's flying is quite good, although it is not as good as Harry's, but it is also one of the best among other students." John's words were very useful to Malfoy, and he felt the same way, but it's a pity that Mr. Malfoy didn't think so. The sorting began, and John saw Ginny of the Weasley family at a glance. The red hair was really eye-catching. Snape didn't know where he went. John probably went to catch Harry and the others. After all, apart from Harry, who else could let Professor Snape do it himself? About this answer, John soon knew, because Professor Snape walked into the Great Hall with a sullen face. "John Wick, come with me." Across the length of a table, Malfoy could feel his dean's depression at the moment, and he couldn't help asking in a low voice, "What did you do? I've never seen such an angry Professor Snape. Can you don't let us get deducted?" John thought for a while. He didn't seem to do anything, but he behaved well. "I don't know, I'll leave first." Under Daphne's worried gaze, John left the auditorium. He was called to Snape's office. There were many bottles and jars in this place, and the contents were either valuable potion ingredients or tissue cut from a certain creature. John was here and saw his living father. Well, he knew where he offended Professor Snape. The son of another family cheated his father, but here he is cheating his son. John couldn't help but touch his forehead, seeing Professor Snape's murderous gaze. He felt that he could still save him. Chapter 52 Punishment and Flying Boots. You are listening at novelfull.audio. "I don't think this matter will deduct my points," John asked sincerely, which made Professor Snape's face darker. "John Wick, your Muggle father broke into Hogwarts illegally and broke an extremely rare Whomping Willow." The corner of Professor Snape's mouth twitched, as if he was in disbelief at Muggles driving a flying car. He flicked open today's Evening Prophet and said sarcastically, "And half a dozen Muggles saw an old car fly over the post office. This has already involved the secrecy law, and even Watson Wick, a Muggle, entered Hogwarts in a serious violation of school regulations." John felt a little serious when he heard it, and even Professor McGonagall and Dumbledore were alarmed. Harry and Ron were trembling, and as for the old man Watson, he also realized that he seemed to have done something to deceive his son. "Professor, if something comes at me, don't embarrass the children." Watson stood up awe-inspiringly, making Harry and Ron feel that this adult is very reliable. Professor McGonagall came here with a serious face. She raised her wand, and Harry thought she was going to turn herself into a dumb snuff bottle, but Professor McGonagall just lit up the fireplace and asked a few people to sit down. "Explain." Professor McGonagall's face looked as if he had caught them on a night excursion last school year. Harry and the two felt that they could still rescue them, and said, "Don't blame us, it's the partition wall of the station that doesn't let us in." He explained that there was a problem with the partition wall, and Professor McGonagall said coldly with pale lips, "Why didn't you send us an owl?" "I believe you have an owl, right?" Harry was tongue-tied when he remembered that it looked like he could do it. Professor McGonagall looked at Watson Wake, opened his mouth slightly and still didn't say anything. "This is the parent of the student and should be handled by Dumbledore." Dumbledore didn't smile when he arrived, and he said to Watson Wick, "I'm sorry to see you again in this way, Mr. Wick." "It's all my fault, Professor Dumbledore." Watson felt ashamed. Watson sighed, "I shouldn't affect my children, right? Mr. Wick, if you are a student, I will write to your parents, but now, I will arrange for someone to send you home. I hope you will not mention this matter to others." This is good news. At least Watson does not need to be cast forgotten curse. The news about Muggles entering Hogwarts in a flying car also needs to be blocked. Dumbledore turned to look at John, and he whispered, "John, as punishment, you need to take good care of the Whomping Willow until it recovers." "Why should I be responsible for what my father did?" John looked helpless, but he still agreed. After all, Dumbledore is already very face-saving. As for what Watson did, it is not an exaggeration to be cast with an oblivion curse and then thrown to the outskirts of London to fend for itself. "I know, Professor Dumbledore." John nodded obediently. Dumbledore looked at Harry and Ron, who were waiting for the death sentence. "We're fired, aren't we?" Ron said desperately. Harry looked at Dumbledore quickly, and Dumbledore said with a serious face, "Not today, Mr. Weasley. But I have to make you feel the seriousness of my actions and I will write to your families. I must also warn you that if there is any more such behavior, I will have to expel you." Such a result made Professor Snape on the side as uncomfortable as eating an earwax-flavored multi-flavored bean. Forget about Ron Weasley, there was nobody in Harry's family except his uncle's family who didn't care about him at all. What's the difference between writing a letter to a parent and letting them go? What's more, he saw that Professor McGonagall didn't even deduct points on the grounds that the two came to school in a flying car before the start of school. It's just too biased. Professor Snape protested seriously, and John saw his dean's gloomy face was about to drip, and he knew that his spirit of deducting points was about to move. "You can't pin it on yourself, right? I was the only Slytherin student present, and the two of Harry were under the supervision of Professor McGonagall from Gryffindor. Don't send Mr. Wick to the station yet." That when Professor Snape saw John's expression, his face was gloomy and about to explode, and finally changed into a strange tone of yin and yang. "John will not make fun of himself, and takes his living father, Watson Wick, to the station." Hagrid was waiting here in the station, and he waved hurriedly when he saw John approaching. "Hagrid, please." John was relieved when he saw that it was Hagrid. He said sincerely, "If my father is too noisy, you can knock him out directly, thank you." The behavior of the filial son caused Watson Wick to protest, and Hagrid smiled awkwardly and said that he would not do this. Faced with Watson's dissatisfaction, John directly defeated the enemy with one move. He said flatly, "I will write to my mother." Now Watson was completely quiet. When he returned home, Mrs. Wick, who received the letter, greeted him. "I heard that Watson took a week of sick leave after that day and did not dare to go to work. Ding, start the Hogwarts phase. Task 2, pass the second school year of the Magic Apprentice. Task reward, Magic Blood +1, any point +3. Ding, trigger the cultivation task, take care of the Whomping Willow until it recovers, get blessing, Botanist. Botanist, improve the success rate of plant cultivation. Ding, trigger the challenge task, keep the first grade in the grade until the end of the semester, get any point +1, blessing, hardworking and studious. Diligent and studious, if you study continuously for more than 2 hours, you can get a 1-hour efficiency bonus. You just turned on the system for me at this time, do you want to see if I will be fired?" After John sent his father away, the second phase of Hogwarts began. He seriously suspected that the reason why the system was turned on at this time was because he might have been fired earlier. Fortunately, everything is fine. Dumbledore is not Principal Phineas Nigellus Black. If he were, it is estimated that 3 students would have to leave here today. After all, he is the only one who can be named the most annoying principal in history. John missed dinner, so he had to go to the kitchen to see if he could get a dinner. it is a great honor for the Hogwarts house elves to serve Mr. Wizard. After John got a dinner, instead of going back to his bedroom, he went to the room of requirement. After walking back and forth through the huge tapestry 3 times, John entered the training room. I haven't been here for a while, and another layer of dust has accumulated here. Using magic to sweep the dust out of the window, John pulled the ironwick sword from the small bag. At the same time, he took out the flying boots and put them on his feet, and the shoes, which were still too wide, became a good fit after putting them into his feet. There is no slight discomfort on the feet, just as easy as not wearing shoes. The feather of a rune horse is lighter than a spider's silk, plus it has a levitating spell. John's heel bumped, and 2 wings stretched out from the side of the shoe. He jumped to a height of 3 meters with a single leap, and the little wings were waving to keep him afloat. Holding the sword of Ironwick in his hand, John chanted a spell on the blade. I am a fire dragon. As the spell fell, the spell on the sword glowed red, and the flame ignited along the blade. A dozen huge human-shaped targets fell in the training ground and floated in the air. John held the flame sword and slashed down with a single sword, and the human-shaped targets were separated neatly. At the same time, where it is cut, flames will burn from the wound. Without using a wand, John easily destroyed all the human targets. In the midst of the flames, John fell to the ground and looked at the damage he had done. He shouted towards the training ground, Hard Mode. There are 4 modes in this training ground, which are Training, Entry, Difficulty, and Master. The training dummy does not move and is only suitable for testing. There will be a target dodge situation at the beginning, and there will be an attacking puppet similar to a puppet when it is difficult. John had tried the hard mode before, but he couldn't pass due to the quality of the sword. Now that he has a new weapon, John decides to see if he can beat it. With the order given, the humanoid target was retracted, and 5 wizard-like figures stepped out of the fireplace. After the puppet appeared, it began to attack John. Chapter 53 Difficult Mode and Training Field Changes. You are listening at novelfull.audio. One of the 5 dolls that appeared rushed out, slashing at John with a wooden sword in his hand. John raised his sword to block, then turned sideways and drew his sword, slashing at the puppet's waist. The speed is faster, and the damage is higher at the same time. Turning to look at the doll that was cut in half, John looked at the blessing he had obtained at the end of the last school year. Knight, when holding a sword with both hands, the power is greatly improved, and when used with a mount, the power can be greatly increased again. Point 1 Blessing used 2 large margins, and John secretly thought that he deserved the blessing he risked his life to get, when he was fighting against a puppet last semester. Let alone beheaded, he almost fell to his knees. Without being hit by a sword, although it is a wooden sword, the wooden sword in the puppet's hand is very hard and heavy, and it can make a hole in the ground if you swing it casually. Today I'm going to get through the difficult mode. John was in high spirits, and the second puppet stepped out. The speed of the puppet is very fast, and it rushes towards John. John calmed down, and then Reducto. The white light hit the doll, blowing it to pieces. Holding his wand in his left hand, John nodded as he watched the effect he had created. With the improvement of magic power experience, the power of magic spells has also been improved. He tested the power of the spell without talking about martial arts, and John's behavior seemed to annoy the rest of the puppets. In the next second, the 3 puppets rushed out at the same time. One has great strength, the other is extremely fast, and the other is flexible and changeable, and will shoot a spell from time to time. John's complexion changed drastically. He swung his sword to resist the attack, but also had to take into account the possibility of being attacked. Under such exhaustion, he soon lost his face. He was hit by the red light of the wizard puppet and flew out of the range of the training ground. The 3 attacking figures stopped still, and John felt nauseous and wretched. Vomit. He spat it out, and a slug slipped out of his mouth. I rely on. The visual impact was so strong that John couldn't hold back and vomited again. Now more slugs appeared, and he hurried to get his wand to break the spell for himself. Because of training, he took off the amulet without triggering the iron armor curse. Unexpectedly, this puppet used a small curse, which did not hurt much and was extremely insulting. At least John was disgusted, which made him want to tear down the 3 guys directly. A mage, an assassin, and a warrior. After lifting the spell, John wiped away all the slugs on the ground. His face is solemn, and the 3 match perfectly. One is responsible for carrying the front, one is responsible for disturbing the enemy from the side, and the other is responsible for the main output. This combination gave John a sense of sight as if he had become a wild leader and was brushed by a team. He tried a few more times, and after the third time he had lifted his bulging front teeth, John couldn't help it. It's a bit difficult to fight one of these three, maybe it's easy to say as long as you upgrade. The pupils dilated, and John summoned the panel, magic power, level 3, 1085/1500.4244334.74122, blessings, physical fitness, quick attack, precision, Shuaba 2.0, pilot, long distance running, sword dance, night devil, troll buster, night, fire swallowing, deterrence, hardening, dragon language. The big sword has always been level 4. Although it is enough, but it still pales in comparison to this combination. John is considering whether to upgrade. He only has a little random point left. If he uses it, he will have to wait until the next mission is completed before he can get it. Forget it, there is no danger in Hogwarts for the time being. The spirit of not admitting defeat and being disgusted just now, John must dismantle these 3 dolls to vent his anger. He lightly tapped on the mastery of the great sword, and in an instant, his sense of familiarity with the great sword became stronger. Not only that, but when he recalled the previous battles, he realized how stupid he thought his perfect defense was. It seems that after thousands of times of practice, John regained his grip on the sword, and the control of the sword is like an arm. A weapon is an extension of a limb. He looked intently at the 3 dolls. As they re-entered, the 3 figures looked up at John together. Come on, I am Fire Dragon. With a whisper, flames rekindled on Ironwick's sword. John was the first to strike, and he galloped off like a wild horse. The warrior doll went up to meet it, and slashed away from top to bottom. Not to be outdone, John held the sword in both hands instead of retreating. His body rubbed against the wooden sword dangerously, and he swung his big sword through the wind and slashed at the warrior doll. At this moment, a red light flew towards John, and he slammed his right foot, and the red light flew past the blade. Immediately afterwards, the sound of breaking wind sounded from behind, and it was an assassin's puppet attack. John's sword slashed out and adjusted accordingly, blocking the blow with his back sword. The warrior reacted and attacked again. John flicked the assassin with both hands, and swung the sword from top to bottom, cutting off the sword-holding hand of the warrior doll. The mage puppet attacked again, and John seized the opportunity to pull out his wand, cast the iron armor curse to block the attack, and at the same time rotate his body around his left foot as the center fulcrum, and suddenly threw out the great sword in his right hand. The hilt of the sword slipped through the palm of his hand, and was caught by the tail just as he was about to let go. As a result, the blade of the sword extended a certain distance out of thin air, which just happened to penetrate the assassin puppet approaching behind him with the sword. Of the 3 dolls, one lost combat power and the other was penetrated, and the remaining mage doll kept firing spell attacks. Seeing this, John kept using the iron armor curse to resist, and by the way, a spell was thrown and hit the approaching one-armed warrior doll, making him follow in the footsteps of an assassin. Between one attack and one block, John gradually approached the mage doll. Although mages can also move, they are too slow compared to assassins. John flipped a spell, and backhanded a ball of white light that hit the mage's body and blew him away, taking advantage of the victory and pursuing. The sword of Ironwick pierced through the body of the mage doll, and the hot flame instantly ignited it. It's finally cleared. John suddenly felt a breath of depression dissipate from his chest. He sat down refreshed. Only level 5 can beat it, so how many levels is the master level? John was even more curious about the rest of the masters. The difficulties were all like this. Could the masters have to fight Voldemort by themselves? Thinking about it, it is impossible. Just as John was sitting on the ground, the wooden sword in the corner began to change at this moment. The big wooden sword, which was originally rough in shape, gradually became smaller, and the excess part fell to the ground, forming a human shape like skin. Meanwhile, in the principal's office, Dumbledore came back after finishing the matter. There, the sword of Gryffindor trembled slightly. Seeing this scene, Dumbledore walked towards the sword of Gryffindor with a look of astonishment on his face. Albus. The sorting hat placed there suddenly opened its mouth, and Dumbledore turned his head to look, as if thinking of something. Is he back? It wasn't him, it was his secret room that was opened. When it comes to understanding Hogwarts, the Sorting Hat undoubtedly knows the most. Dumbledore stepped up to the Sorting Hat and asked, "Who is it?" "I don't know, you know, the founder of the Fourth Academy has always been like this." This made Dumbledore fall into thought. He knew that the founders of the four houses had all left their own inheritance in Hogwarts, just like the Slytherin Chamber of Secrets that was once opened, and the other three also had their own inheritance, and the man in the Sorting Hat's mouth is Gryffindor. "Gryffindor's Chamber of Secrets, is that you, Harry?" Dumbledore's first thought was Harry. In his opinion, the Chamber of Secrets would only be open to approved successors, and the savior Harry Potter will be the most promising one. The sword of Gryffindor stopped trembling, and Dumbledore fell into thought. "Did you also sense that the danger is still approaching?" John rested enough to go back. After getting up, John turned and picked up the sword he had stuck in the doll. The flames had been extinguished, and the red light on the spell had dimmed. He turned around, took a step and stopped. In front of him, a young man wearing a wizard hat was watching him. At that moment, John felt like he was being targeted by a lion. Chapter 54 Inheritance Test and Roaring Letter. You are listening at novelfull.audio. The man has red hair hanging over his shoulders, a handsome face, and a beard on his chin. Pieces of sawdust-like skin adhered to the body, making it feel like a wooden man. An alarm bell sounded in John's mind. He silently clenched his sword, and his wand in his left hand was ready to cast a spell at any time. "You are," that the last piece of peeled sawdust stuck to his face. The originally thick wooden sword was now a twig-like wand. The man opened his eyes brightly, and the first thing he said was, "You must be a Gryffindor, right?" I'm Slytherin." "Slytherin?" That the man looked at John in a daze. He held a big sword in his right hand and a wand in his left hand. This was obviously his own way of attacking. "You said you were Slytherin." Godric Gryffindor laughed and said, "Don't lie, you beat the test I left behind, and my hat can't get you into Slytherin." He was confident that this was a joke made by the little wizard, but John heard something wrong. "Your hat?" "Sorting Hat." John tentatively asked, "May I ask who you are?" "Godric Gryffindor. You can also call me the old headmaster if you like." Gryffindor, who seemed to be in his prime, habitually wanted to touch his beard. After remembering that his body was made according to his youth, he stopped. "Founder of the Fourth Academy?" John was greatly shocked. "You can also call me this way. This is the secret room I left behind." "How is it?" "It's very useful." "How is Gryffindor now?" "Did you beat Slytherin in the Academy Cup?" Gryffindor still thought that John was a student of Gryffindor, and when he thought of his former good friend Salazar Slytherin, Gryffindor snorted coldly. It seems that the grievances between Gryffindor and Slytherin have a long history and have existed since the school was founded. Seeing that he hated Slytherin so much, John silently pointed to the green color on his clothes and said, "I'm really a Slytherin. If you don't believe me, look at it." The eye-catching green and silver were harsh on the wizard's robes, and Gryffindor was in a bad mood all of a sudden. "Hell, did my hat break and he sorted you into Slytherin?" Not to mention the little lion of Gryffindor. Even Gryffindor himself seriously doubted whether there was something wrong with his hat at the moment. John didn't know what to say, so he smiled awkwardly. The students who passed the test to reappear themselves were not Gryffindors, which made Godric Gryffindor a little uncomfortable. However, the secret room he left behind was open to the whole school, aiming to find an excellent successor. Although the heir was Slytherin, he had no choice but to admit it. "Well, you have passed the test and are qualified to inherit my inheritance." With a flick of his wand in Gryffindor's hand, the fallen doll returned to normal and walked into the fireplace, and 2 chairs were conjured out of thin air. He sat in one of the chairs, his wand in his hand like a twig. "As long as you complete my next test, I will give you the power you seek." John sat opposite in silence. Hearing this, he hesitated for a while and asked, "I want to ask, if I accept your test, will I be expelled from Slytherin?" Gryffindor said disapprovingly, "Isn't it good to expel? Anyway, pure-blood families are generally not short of money." "Then what, head of Gryffindor? I'm a Muggleborn." Gryffindor was shocked. "Even if you are a Slytherin, you are still a Muggle. What happened to Hogwarts during my absence? That Slytherin was planted by Muggles." Gryffindor, who felt that the amount of information was a bit explosive, said that he needed to sort it out, and then the more he thought about it, the more wrong it became. Could it be that Gryffindor and Slytherin changed their names? That he glanced at John again, and the more he looked at it, the more likely it was. It turns out that Godric Gryffindor is a big boy character. He and Salazar Slytherin are brave and calm, one pursues adventure, and the other yearns for magic. The two are opposites and best friends. Even if they parted ways later, they would break up peacefully. Simply Godric Gryffindor didn't think about it anymore, and said, "Don't worry, my legacy faces the whole school, and you won't be expelled." Okay. John was relieved when he heard that he would not be expelled. Although the inheritance was very fragrant, if he was expelled, Voldemort would not be able to praise himself after his resurrection. The test is divided into 3, namely the bird in the forest, the lion in the mountain, and the brave man with the sword. During the test, I will observe your performance. Gryffindor finished speaking and was about to wave his wand, but John raised his hand to interrupt him. John said apologetically, "I'm sorry, head of Gryffindor, I may not be able to do it now, and it's bedtime now." Gryffindor held his breath in his mouth, and his movements were all arranged, but John let him go. "Then change the time." Gryffindor said this after holding back for a long time. "Thank you, head of Gryffindor." John got up and bowed and left. He was startled when he heard that the test was about to start. Ding, trigger the challenge mission, Gryffindor Legacy Phase 1, the bird in the forest, get any reward point plus, dash, blessing, forest flying man. Now John doesn't have a single amulet on him, and he is not ready to take risks if he is not fully equipped. Only by being cautious can it last for a long time. After returning to the dormitory, John prepared to recover his energy before going there. The next day, John came to the Great Hall, and the morning was rich, with porridge and pickled herring, and breaded eggs and bacon. Although eating pickled herring in the morning feels like eating snail noodles with white porridge, but after so many years, John's stomach is already hardened. He was eating bread with white porridge, and a blonde girl was sitting next to him. Daphne stared at John's pretty side face, and laughed inexplicably. She seemed to say casually, "John, do you know that our defense against the dark arts professor is Gilderoy Lockhart? My mother really likes him." John took a sip of porridge, ate it with sliced bacon, and said flatly, "I read his book, and it is really well written, but I don't know how the teaching level is. Changing defense against the dark arts teachers every year has led to uneven levels of students in this class. John doesn't know what the school thinks. If you have to be so stubborn, can't you change your name and teach the same class? Isn't it the same as countering the dark arts?" Voldemort cursed the position of Professor of Defense against the Dark Arts. "What does it have to do with me as a Professor of Defense against the Dark Arts?" I don't know if the curse is true or not, but it is true that one professor per year is consumed. The Professor Quirrell in the previous school year was not serious about teaching at all. John learned black magic from him later, knowing that Quirrell's own level is not low, but he just deliberately hides his clumsiness. Malfoy came over with 2 attendants. He found John excitedly, and said, "John, Potter and the nasty Weasley got into trouble this time, and they came to the school by speeding car. It's a pity you weren't at the university yesterday, Hall." Word spread quickly, and that night Gryffindor celebrated Harry's recklessness. Harry also realized that he had done a stupid thing, and the price was that Hermione was angry. As the wisest person in the group of 3 little cats, Hermione couldn't believe that someone could be so stupid. She looked at Traveling with the Vampire angrily. As a book lover, she was completely fascinated by this book, and she was full of longing for the author Gilderoy Lockhart. The postman arrived today, and hundreds of owls crowded into the auditorium, making a mess in the sky. An old owl flew towards Gryffindor, and it was about to stop, but it plunged into Hermione's milk jug. Errol, that the old owl belonged to the Weasley family. Ron rescued it, but saw the red envelope in its mouth. Roar letter, now there is a good show to watch. John saw Malfoy turned around abruptly, as if he was watching a show of rice. "Ha, a howler letter, Weasley is going to suffer." Malfoy gloated, and the attendant next to him made a crying movement very cooperatively. Ron was very reluctant to open the howler letter, and Neville whispered, "You'd better open it. It's even worse if you don't open it. Grandma sent it to me once, but I ignored it." As a result, Neville shivered at the thought of that horrible scene. Ron swallowed hard. He didn't need to think about it and knew that the end would be dire. With trembling hands, he opened the roaring letter. The huge roar inside made the entire auditorium tremble, and John watched a pinch of ashes fall into his porridge, and he quietly exchanged it in front of Malfoy. Malfoy enjoyed the scene of Weasley's death with relish, picked up the porridge and drank it deliciously, but the porridge was too little, and he finished it in 2 or 3 sips. Chapter 55 Hogwarts knows the king in Whomping Willow. You are listening at novelfull.audio. The first class was History of Magic. Before class, John went to see the Whomping Willow, which was injured by his father. The Whomping Willow is a large willow tree outside Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Witchcraft and Witchcraft and Witchcraft and Witchcraft. It has a furious temperament, and no matter what hits it, it will be beaten by the branches of the willow tree. By the time John arrived at the Whomping Willow, there were already 2 people there. I heard that I once came across a Whomping Willow when I was traveling. As long as it is like this. Stop it, you're only going to piss it off. Don't worry, I'm the holder of the Order of Merlin 3rd class, Gilderoy Lockhart with the most charming smile. Snapped. Strange, why not? To shut up. John watched as the new defense against the dark arts professor who claimed to know everything took out his wand and cast a spell, successfully making Whomping Willow furious. Professor Sprout, a fellow herbalist professor under the tree, was innocently implicated, and the Whomping Willow kicked Professor Sprout out. At this moment, Professor Sprout has the heart to kill Lockhart. This former Ravenclaw student is a guy who knows everything about kings. Professor Sprout looked sullen, wondering why Dumbledore would let this Ravenclaw disgrace come back to teach. It's all right, Professor Sprout, I've traveled with trolls and it's a piece of cake for this injury. Stop it, don't come here. Professor Sprout's short and fat body exploded with infinite strength, and he rolled and crawled out of the attacking range of the Whomping Willow. She was really scared. If this guy continued to deal with it, she might either die of the Whomping Willow or herself, so she excused that class was about to start, and told this annoying guy to leave quickly. Is this king knowing the defense against the dark arts professor? After John witnessed how Lockhart entrapped a senior herbalism professor, he fell into deep thought. Even if the professor of defense against the dark arts was thrown away every year, it wouldn't be possible to let such a thing in. Recalling that he saw Lockhart's works, John seriously doubted whether the 2 Lockharts were the same person. There are also gunmen in the wizarding world. The seeds of doubt have been planted, and John comes near the Whomping Willow after the 2 leave. He had seen a secret passage under the Whomping Willow from the Marauder's map, but how to approach it was a problem. The Whomping Willow is very ferocious, and the branches that used to stand tall are now collapsed. It doesn't take much thinking to know that this is the contribution of my own father. John approached the Whomping Willow, and a branch was drawn directly over it. He backed away, the Whomping Willow waving its branches and looking aggressive. It is so sensitive and active, it may have unexpected effects if it is used to make amulets. Watching the Whomping Willow waving there, John stroked his chin and kept his eyes on the wound. He was already thinking about where to get some of it. As for the treatment of Whomping Willow, isn't it normal to be injured in such a thing? His left hand drew his wand, and John drew his sword. Petrificus totalis. The waving branches stopped, and John seized the opportunity to use the flying boots to jump up and cut off some of the broken branches. After doing all this, John launched his flying boots and flew away. After the Whomping Willow recovered, it waved its branches angrily like a group of demons. I'm not going to study how to treat you. John was justified, and even thought the Whomping Willow was petty. It's such a big tree, what's wrong with giving yourself something? With a wave of his hand, John stuffed the branch into the small bag and turned around without taking a cloud. Regarding the treatment of Whomping Willow, he felt that this professional problem might require a professional person. For example, Professor Sprout is a very good choice. Class time was approaching, and John was familiar with all the secret passages in Hogwarts, so he didn't panic at all. 1 second before the History of Magic class was about to start, he stepped on the clock and entered the classroom. Professor Binns of the History of Magic forgot to take his body away from his sleep and became a ghost. His lessons are boring without any vividness, just like his old and lifeless appearance makes people feel drowsy. Even John barely kept himself from falling asleep. He read the History of Magic in class, but he was actually studying with alchemy notes. After getting through the History of Magic, the afternoon is defense against the dark arts. At lunchtime, Ron was there cursing his broken wand. My mother said Lockhart was a brave wizard. Unlike Daphne, who was full of expectations, John remembered what he saw in the morning, and he no longer had any expectations for defense against the dark arts class. He picked up the potato with the skin on and peeled it carefully, then put it in his mouth in one bite. Malfoy wasn't around, because he'd laughed at Harry in the past. Harry's capture by Lockhart this morning was another publicity, which made the Malfoy children very jealous. Daphne forgot to bring the new work I Can Be Magical that her mother asked Lockhart to sign, so she went back to get it. Hermione walked over with Lockhart's book in her arms. With a slight blush on her face, she said with full expectation, "I don't know what kind of vivid class Professor Lockhart will bring, just like in his book. It's an adventure." I'm afraid this is a bit difficult." John couldn't bear to tell her the truth. Looking at Hermione's appearance as a young girl Huichuan, after knowing the truth, "I'm afraid she will have nothing to love." If it was the old Hermione, she would definitely be able to understand the meaning of John's words, but now she is still immersed in admiration for Lockhart. John thought it was very interesting. If this scene was filmed, it would be a landslide black material when Hermione became the Minister of Magic. Harry over there was in trouble, not just because of Malfoy's belittling taunts, but also because of Lockhart's embarrassment when he arrived. Colin Creevey is a Gryffindor first-year student, and he is also a fan of Harry Potter. Colin pressed the camera to take pictures of Harry, and Lockhart asked him to take a photo of the two together after he came over. This made Harry extremely uncomfortable. During the afternoon class bell, Lockhart thought he was doing well and took Harry away in his arms. Ron and Hermione were left behind, and the new defense against the dark arts professor seemed to be enjoying the limelight. John also finished the last potato, and he came to Ron, who was blushing angrily after being mocked by Malfoy. "Ron, don't worry about it, okay? I heard your wand is broken." Hearing John's words, Ron took out the broken wand in frustration. Taking the wand over and looking at it, the core inside is still intact, which is good news. After all, it was his father's fault. John felt that as a son, he still had to save him. John looked at it for a while and said, "I happen to be learning how to make a wand. Maybe I can fix it for you." "Really? That's great, thank you, John." Ron was overjoyed, and if Mrs. Weasley knew he'd broken his wand, he'd probably send another Howler letter. It was like a lifesaver, and he was very grateful. "It's time for class. I'll fix it for you after I find all the repair materials." The defense against the dark arts class in the afternoon is taught by the two colleges together. John returned the wand to Ron, and they walked towards the defense against the dark arts classroom. The new defense against the dark arts classroom is full of photos at first glance, and the owner of these photos is, not surprisingly, Gilderoy Lockhart. Not long after entering the classroom, Lockhart came in. He was different from other professors, wearing a gorgeous turquoise robe, and a turquoise top hat with a gold rim on his shiny blonde hair. The flamboyant appearance made Malfoy feel uncomfortable for a while. This guy still hated the photo of Lockhart and Harry, so he clicked his tongue. On the contrary, the girls reacted. Their eyes were shining with gold and their faces were flushed, as if they were fans of stars. Most of them had mothers who were Lockhart fans, or were Lockhart fans themselves. As a liar, Lockhart, in addition to being able to use the Oblivion Curse, is also very good looking. He made a show of himself, especially in self-introduction. "I, Gilderoy Lockhart, RD Class of the Order of Merlin, honorary member of the Defense Against the Dark Arts League, 5-time Witcher Weekly Award for Most Charming Smile, but I never talk about that. I didn't smile to banish the Banshee of Wandlorn." There was also a cold stalk at the end, but unfortunately no one could understand it. John was speechless. After such a long series of introductions, the only useful one was the honorary member of the Defense Against the Dark Arts Alliance. No matter how you looked at it, he thought it was a vase, and John was able to confirm his guess soon. Lockhart's first class test turned out to be a questionnaire. The content of the questionnaire directly confused John. 1. What is Gilderoy Lockhart's favorite color? 2. What was Gilderoy Lockhart's secret ambition? 3. What do you consider Gilderoy Lockhart's greatest achievement to date? What the hell are these? Are you sure you are here for class and not for the idle meeting? Chapter 56 Wisps and Deterrence. You are listening at novelfull.audio. TSK, almost no one remembers that I like lilac color the most. I mentioned it in a year with the Tibetan snowman. A few students need to read Wandering with Werewolves carefully. In chapter 12 of the book, I clearly stated that my ideal birthday gift is that all people with magic and non-magic get along in harmony, but I will not refuse a gift. Large bottle of Ogden Old Fire whiskey. Lockhart reviewed the test papers, expressing his dismay at the inability of most people to answer his easy questions, but he still comforted the group of little wizards with a naughty wink, let alone Ron. Even the other little wizards couldn't hold back anymore. Hermione was probably the only one left in the classroom who was still listening attentively. But when Lockhart suddenly mentioned her name, Hermione was startled. But Miss Hermione Granger knows that my secret ambition is to rid the world of evil, and to sell my own line of hair conditioners. Lockhart looked at the test paper in surprise and relief. Sure enough, outstanding people would attract extra attention wherever they went, he said happily. 100 points, where is Miss Hermione Granger? Hermione raised her hand tremblingly after being recognized. Lockhart smiled and said, Great, 10 points for Gryffindor. This made Hermione even more excited, because it was the first time she had gained points ahead of John. Immediately Hermione looked at John for the first time, with hard-won victory in her eyes, seeing the provocation in her eyes. John thought something was wrong. Miss Know-It-All Hermione Granger resurfaced and saw the possibility of defeating John again. Lockhart over there didn't know that his unintentional behavior restored the confidence of a heartbroken student. He put a large cage covered with a cloth on the podium, exaggerating his body language. Now, beware. My mission is to teach you to defend yourself against the most evil things the wizarding world has ever known. You will face the most terrifying things in this classroom. There was a threatening tone in his words, as if he wanted to scare the group of young wizards. Maybe he felt that he was going too far, so he changed his tone and said with infinite confidence, But remember, as long as I am here, you will not suffer any harm. I only ask you to remain calm. Some little wizards were frightened by his words, and their laughter stopped. Neville in the first row felt very insecure and shrank back. I must ask you not to scream, that will anger them. Emphasizing again in a low and threatening tone, the atmosphere was finally rendered sufficiently terrifying that the whole class held its breath. Under everyone's nervous gaze, he opened the cover. Seamus generally doesn't laugh in class unless he can't help it, while Lockhart seems to have captured a pack of Dementors. Beneath the hood is a pack of Cornish elves. These elves are iron blue, with small pointed faces, sharp and piercing voices, and they are as noisy as budgerigars. But even so, it can't change that this is just a little guy less than 8 inches. Seamus's smile made Lockhart feel embarrassed, and he said sullenly, They may also be little saboteurs as cunning as devils. But more laughter greeted him, much to Lockhart's chagrin, and he swore he meant no harm. He said loudly, Well, let's see what you do with them. He opened the cage to make the group of students suffer, but the elf who was released directly messed up. They were flying around in the classroom like little sky monkeys, and some little wizards were picked up by the elves by their ears. Others rushed out of the window and smashed the glass of the classroom and scattered it on the ground. Lockhart was right, these guys wreck like devils. Ink was sprayed everywhere, and an elf flew by John's side and tried to pull his ear, but he gave a threatening look to start, and the elf was trembling with fright. How dare the Cornwall elf touch the dragon's beard, and immediately flew away screaming in fright. Lockhart hastily instructed the students to gather the elves together, chanting the spell he made up to solve it. It had no effect at all, and caused Neville to be picked up by the ear. John frowned, and an elf was chasing the girl with ink in his arms. Enough. Amid the chaos, John stood up, he gave a cold shout, and the long way radiated out, making all the troublesome elves stay on the spot. Lockhart felt as if he saw a dragon, and he screamed in fright and ran outside. The little elves even shivered and fell to the ground in a group. How pitiful and pitiful that look was. John didn't get angry and arrogant, and directly ended the chaos. He drew his wand and cast a spell on the elf who was still trying to escape, the transfiguration spell. Turned the table into a cage, trapping the elves inside. The get-out-of-class bell rang and the group of students woke up like a dream. Under the eyes of many students, John walked to the door, and immediately said a little strangely, Aren't you going to dismiss get out of class? Right. The students who reacted had different attitudes. Daphne looked straight at John, and Malfoy also closed his wide mouth. The Slytherins cheered, and it seemed to them that John had saved the lesson. "Cool, that's amazing," Seamus in Gryffindor said excitedly. "Did you see just now? John scared the elf so much that he couldn't move. I felt like he was a fire dragon just now, it was just too scary." Harry also felt the same way. He obviously hadn't seen an adult Charmander, but for a moment he seemed to see an adult Norwegian Ridgeback. Ron was terrified, he was really scared, not only John, but also Lockhart's poor class level. "I never want to take Lockhart's class again, it's a nightmare." Hermione also wanted to defend her idol. Maybe he just wanted to give us a chance to practice, it should be. The more Hermione said, the more confident he became. Ron laughed angrily. "Practice?" He was scared away. Harry added, "I think he was scared off by John." Point two of the three cubs had a bad opinion of Lockhart, and Hermione began to wonder if she had a crush on the wrong person. Ron doubted even the stuff in Lockhart's book had ever been done. Deterrence works well against lesser magical creatures. John stopped the elf with a roar, and the effect was outstanding. He felt that deterrence could be used as a group petrification spell for Qing soldiers, and this kind of deterrence was in the natural blood. Applying pressure based on its own strength can be called another magical skill. The afternoon class ended in a panic. John went to the herbalism greenhouse, took 2 large buckets of dragon dung to the Whomping Willow. Since Dumbledore let himself take care of the Whomping Willow until he recovered, John didn't do anything wrong. After arriving at the Whomping Willow, John did not immediately use his wand to stop the Whomping Willow. He activated deterrence and shouted, "Stop!" Before entering the range of the Whomping Willow, the Whomping Willow danced its branches wildly as if offended. John couldn't get close, so he had to use the petrification spell to immobilize the Whomping Willow. "Looks like my deterrence isn't enough to stop the Whomping Willow." Thinking about it, Lou is an extreme plant, and his deterrence may backfire in front of him. Pour dragon dung around the Whooping Willow. It is very good for the plants. The Whomping Willow calmed down as John stepped out of range. He nodded. He had done his duty. Back in the dormitory, John refined the willow branches of the Whomping Willow into a kind of vigilance amulet, which will warn if there is danger approaching. This amulet is more sensitive than the Welks, and even a kind of malice can be felt by the Whomping Willow amulet. "Now you can try to break through." Thinking that he still had a bird in the forest test, John fully armed himself. After he had the small bag, he stuffed some potions into it, some for detoxification and some for fire protection. With everything in place, he headed to the room of requirement on the 8th floor. After meditating on the training ground 3 times in his mind, a door appeared in front of him. Walking inside, "Gryffindor is already waiting here." John nodded and said, "I'm ready to start the test." With a wave of Gryffindor's wand, the room of requirement changed instantly. Plants grew out of the training ground to wrap them, and trees rose from the ground. The changes continued for a while, and when everything stopped, John was already in a vast forest. It was the first time he knew that the room of requirement was used in this way. If he hadn't seen it with his own eyes, he would even have thought he was taken into the Forbidden Forest. Chapter 57: The Bird of the Woods and the Lion of the Mountain. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Gryffindor stood beside John. He fell down on a tree and lay down comfortably, and said, "In this forest there is a golden bird called Golden Snidget. You need to find it. Are you sure you're here?" John glanced at the huge forest that looked like the Forbidden Forest. "It would be difficult for you to find anyone here, let alone a Snidget the size of a golden snitch," Gryffindor said with a half-smile. "Of course it's here. In addition, you'd better find it before dark, otherwise there will be other things appearing at night." After all, Gryffindor looked like he was watching a good show, so John thought about it and looked for it first. He took steps to search in this forest. The Snidget is a very fast bird that is as elusive as the golden snitch. Finding the snitch in Quidditch was already a headache enough that John felt like he was looking for a needle in a haystack. After walking for a long time, he didn't see any trace of Jean Facia. So he raised his wand directly and cast a spell on a tree. Reducto. The white light hit the tree and instantly exploded the tree. The huge movement caused a large group of birds to fly up. John stared carefully at the flock of birds, but saw no golden light inside. "In this case, let's have a bombing." John did what he said, flew into the air with his flying boots, and he started bombing in all directions. One by one, the shattering curses fell on the ground and caused an explosion, shaking the forest. Gryffindor was surprised by what he did, and he didn't expect that someone would choose to directly push to find Jean Facia, but when you think about it carefully, John's approach is completely correct. The Snidget is a sensitive bird, and it flies very fast. Before the danger comes, Jean Snidget is enough to complete the dodge and fly out. In other words, John's method may seem reckless, but it is actually very shrewd. A witty wizard, you can see the most convenient way at a glance, but you are still too young. The corner of Gryffindor's mouth raised into a smile. This method is indeed very convenient, but it consumes a lot of magic power, and you can't last long. Human bomber. Gryffindor was ready to see John's joke. However, after a while, John's magic power gradually bottomed out. He took out the small bag, and took out a bottle of recovery potion from it. Ton ton ton. With a sigh of relief, the magic power in John's body began to recover. Immediately a new round of bombing began. This operation stunned Gryffindor. I don't believe how much you have left. He didn't believe it anymore. No matter how much a person drinks medicine, there must be a limit. As John dried up potions one after another, Gryffindor gradually became confused. Didn't it mean that he was born as a muggle? Why is there more potion than the ancient pureblood family? John drank at least a dozen bottles of recovery potions, and the forest was blown up beyond recognition. Finally, after killing another bottle of potion, a golden figure flew out of the forest. John's eyesight, strengthened by the fire dragon's blood, was locked on the golden figure, and without a word, he directly urged the flying boots to chase after it. Along the way, Golden Snidget flew extremely fast, and his figure was agile. Constantly dodging and widening the distance in the forest, John chased for several hours but failed to catch up. Seeing that the sky was getting dark, there were strange screams in the forest. A guy with bird feathers running on 2 feet rushed out. Its shape looked like a hairy dragon. Seeing this, John pulled out his wand and pointed it at the guy to attack. The white light precisely hit the monster bird and made it fly out, and soon more monster birds came out, and even after being hit by the shattering curse, they were able to continue to stand up and chase after a while. A bird-shaped ogre. Recognizing what it was, John increased his output and hit a channel with a full blow, taking the opportunity to fly high. Jean Snidget has become a small dot in the sky. All petrochemical. Aiming at the location of Golden Snidget, John kept casting spells behind him. The Snidget is so flexible that even riding the best broom may not be able to catch it, let alone under the interference of so many bird-shaped man-eating monsters. John's brain turned quickly, and he released the fire curse towards the forest. The flame curse engulfed one tree, followed by the second, third. The flames gradually spread out, and the bird-shaped ogre was burned by the flames. Until it made strange screams and fluttered. Others were so smoked that they fell down one after another. The Snidget was flying fast, and John was flying at full speed without distractions. The speed of his flying boots was adjusted to the maximum, and the flames and smoke interfered with Jean Facia, and Jean Facia gradually couldn't fly. After the wings stopped flapping, Jean Snidget fell down. John caught it before it fell into the flames, and he completed the trial, but the price was the burning of the entire forest, which made Gryffindor frown. Clear water like a spring, Aguamenti. John summoned a huge water ball and headed towards the fire. Seeing this scene, Gryffindor finally let go of his frown. Although he will use some means to win, he will make up for it after achieving his goal. After commenting in his heart, John also brought the fire under control. Landing in front of Gryffindor, John opened his palms, and a golden bird was trying to stand up in his hands. You have completed the test of the bird in the woods. Gryffindor nodded, and waved his wand to disperse the forest scene. Ding, trigger the challenge task. Gryffindor Legacy Phase 1, Lion of the Mountain. Get any reward point plus, blessing, heavy hit. Gryffindor said, lions do not lack courage and strength. Lions in the mountains need to be stronger than other lions. You need to prove to me that you have enough strength. I want you to climb the mountain. After speaking, the Gryffindor wand waved again. The mountain rose from the ground, and the House of Requirement instantly became a mountain. Gryffindor pointed at several pieces of alchemy equipment on John, and John's amulet and flying boots were removed. Your alchemy level is very good, but you can't use it now. When it comes to climbing mountains, John would be cheating if he wore sky boots. John is also speechless. Why is his alchemy level not considered his own strength? Glancing at Gao Shan, he took a deep breath, and when he exhaled again, it turned white. Is it cooling down? He looked around in a daze, and the snowflakes were falling. John knew that if he didn't speed up, he might not be able to complete the test. At the foot of the mountain, he moved towards the top of the mountain step by step. The snowflakes were getting bigger and bigger, and with the strong wind blowing, John felt that his body was about to freeze. At the beginning, he could still see the road, but as time went by, there was only white in front of his eyes. John was struggling. On the way, John saw a snowman with white fur. The white-haired snowman came towards John with a growl. If he got hit this way, John would at least lie down for a while. With a solemn face, he dodged the collision from the foot of the Tibetan snowman. Without any hesitation, John pulled out his wand and pointed it at the white-haired snowman's head with a spell. The white-haired snowman rolled down the mountain and formed a big snowball. John thought it was over, but when he turned around, he saw a snowman with white fur. You call this a test? John's lips moved, but he still didn't curse. Casting a disillusionment spell on himself, John intended to go around, but he underestimated the snowman's sense of smell and was spotted by a snowman while passing by. The snowman opened his mouth and was about to roar, but John shot him with a look, and the deterrence was activated immediately. The white-haired snowman froze, and John had already pulled out the iron wick sword. I am a fire dragon. The blade of the sword ignited flames, and John slashed across the snowman's body. The white-haired snowman fell to the ground in response, and the wound on his body burst into flames. It seems that deterrence works. John's eyes narrowed dangerously, and he was no longer polite as a group of snowmen blocked the route in front of him. Holding the sword in both hands, he shouted, "Come on!" The deterrence was activated, and all the snowmen he saw stiffened involuntarily. As the sword of iron wick continued to kill, the speed visible to the naked eye of the snowman decreased. By the end, there were no standing snowmen around John. He clenched his sword tightly and walked towards the top of the mountain step. By step, this scene also caught Gryffindor's eyes. He climbed to the top of the mountain, and the wind and snow stopped. Gryffindor was already waiting for him here, and now there was only one last test left: Hero of the Sword. Chapter 58: The Sword Hero and Legacy. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Ding! Trigger the challenge mission, Gryffindor Legacy Stage 1, Hero of the Sword. Get any reward point plus, blessing, Seeker. Gao Shan disappeared, and they returned to the original training ground. Gryffindor stood aside and applauded, and said, I didn't think you could really get to this point. This is the last test, pass the Master Mode. Master Mode? John looked at Gryffindor. With his current strength, it is unknown whether he will win or lose in the Master Mode. However, he is confident that he can easily pass through the combination of difficult modes again. Now, Gryffindor returned all the alchemy equipment to John, and with the help of the amulet, it is possible to pass the Master Mode. At the same time, Master Mode is on. John thought there would be another doll or something, but saw Gryffindor walk into the middle of the training ground. Come on. Gryffindor waved to John. John was dumbfounded. The object of the Master Mode is Gryffindor. I reported that there was a referee here who beat someone. His heart sank to the bottom all of a sudden. Even though he was much stronger than the first year now, he didn't feel that he could compete with one of the 4 founders of Hogwarts, and this person is Gryffindor, who is the best at dueling among the big 4. However, he has already passed 2 hurdles with difficulty, and he cannot stop here. With heavy steps, John came to the training ground. Gryffindor stood there with only a branch like wand in his hand. He chuckled and said, I admire your courage. Don't worry, I am not 1 out of 10, and I am not as powerful as you imagined. Gryffindor is very satisfied with John, daring to face the powerful. This is the courage that Gryffindor should have. Listening to the comforting words of the other party, John felt that the moisture was quite high, but he was also allowed to try it. Just a moment please. John took out the small bag and dug out a bottle of enhancement potion from it. In Gryffindor's presence, he drank the enhancement potion. Gryffindor didn't take it seriously. Although this kind of behavior of drinking medicine before the battle was a little too cautious, but how much can you drink, little wizard? For the next half a minute, Gryffindor watched John drink bottles of potions into his stomach. If John didn't know how to refine Felicity Elixir, he would have already drank it by now. potions of fire resistance, potions of enhancement, potions of restoration, all kinds of potions, as long as they can enhance strength, were all drunk by John. I'm ready. Now John is full of strength, with a sword in his right hand and a wand in his left, looking at the figure in front of him. Gryffindor felt as if he was looking in a mirror, the corners of his mouth raised slightly. He raised his wand to his chest, and said with a smile on his face, I hope your teacher taught you to duel. Salute to each other before the duel is essential. At any rate, he had fought a duel with others. John also raised his wand and put it on his chest. The two saluted each other, turned and walked back. When counting to 10, John turned around and saw a red light entering his eyes. The amulet was activated instantly, and the iron armor curse blocked the attack. John's back was in a cold sweat, so fast. Fun little item. Gryffindor praised, and shot again. He showed John what a dueling master is. Even though the strength is no longer 1 in 10, Gryffindor's rich experience still made John suffer a lot. The amulet on his body was activated again, and John knew that he could not be passively beaten. He also started to fight back. White light and red light intertwined and shone. I am a fire dragon. The sword was ablaze. John held the sword to split the oncoming red light, and the wand deflected the next attack. Cooperating left and right, he became more proficient. Gryffindor narrowed his eyes, and the wand shot a spell, which was picked away by John and blew up the training ground. The shattered table turned into a big stick and hit John's back. John, who couldn't react, triggered the amulet and was still thrown into the air. Gryffindor seized the opportunity. Thousands of bullets, the objects in the training ground turned into little birds rushing towards John. John turned around and released the flame spell to block, but some birds still passed through and hit him. With a pain in his shoulder, John gritted his teeth and persisted. The left hand released the shattering curse and flew towards Gryffindor, which was easily blocked. Gryffindor used the transfiguration backhand to turn the two stools into lions and rushed towards John. John rolled and dodged while swinging the greatsword. He kept dodging, and Gryffindor hadn't moved a step so far. Pay attention to the coordination of your steps, your spells and your frequency. Gryffindor taught John while attacking, and John heard the words and used the iron armor curse to resist retreating and adjust his attack frequency. He gasped, and the lightning from the Gryffindor wand turned into a whip. John parried and dodged, and Gryffindor shot red light again and hit John's wrist. The sword of Iron Wick flew out uncontrollably, and just before it fell into the hands of Gryffindor, a gleam flashed in John's eyes. His wand pointed, and Iron Wick turned and fell. Gryffindor was forced to back and dodge, and this time, the tempestuous rhythm was finally interrupted. John got up to attack, and he added points to the transformation without hesitation. Level 3 transfiguration made him more handy, pointed out the wand in his hand, and transformed into a puppy biting Gryffindor's calf. Gryffindor turned and knocked the puppy out, but John's attack had already arrived. Fuchsia, a shovel dodged the lunges of two lions, and John shot a spell at Gryffindor. Gryffindor flew back uncontrollably, with his feet up and his head down, as if two hands had grabbed the feet and lifted him up. As expected of the dueling champion, Gryffindor reacted quickly and attacked John's legs without hesitation. John's legs froze immediately, and he decisively launched the final blow. Expelliarmus. Expelliarmus. Petrificus totalis. Petrificus totalis. The red and white rays of light collided and confronted each other in the air, as if the lightning-like attack pulled fiercely. John's eyes turned into vertical pupils, and he raised his right hand to aim at Iron Wick's sword. A wave of magic power was transmitted from the hand, and Iron Wick's sword was summoned, as if it had been slammed, and flew straight towards Gryffindor. Gryffindor was restrained from being able to move, and turned his wand in his hand and shot towards the blade. Iron Wick's sword was bounced away, and Gryffindor was also hit, and his body was frozen and unable to move. While you are sick it kills you. John stretched his left arm and swung his wand in a circular motion to cast a spell at Gryffindor. Gryffindor was knocked out of the air, and his wand was out of his hand. The lion, which was already close to John, opened its mouth wide and was about to bite it off. At this time, it also turned into two chairs and fell to the ground. Okay, you win. Gryffindor froze and couldn't move. He lost, although his current strength is not 1 in 10, and he only attacks with a magic wand. But if you win, and he won't deny it. That fuchsia charm is fun. The fuchsia was created by Snape. Gryffindor has never seen it. released from petrification, Gryffindor stood up like a normal person. On the other hand, John, the victor, was exhausted. He looked at his right hand, and was still reminiscing about the scene of manipulating Ironwick's sword just now. Interesting, I didn't expect you to be able to cast spells without a staff at your age. I underestimated you. Gryffindor applauded, and John didn't understand how he did it. At that moment, he seemed to have returned to the previous state where his magic power was rampant. Scratching his head, John couldn't figure it out, and asked expectantly, "Did I pass it?" Gryffindor nodded, which excited John. "The legacy of the Big Four is exciting just thinking about it," Gryffindor said somewhat complacently. "You will get an extremely powerful sword, which is the weapon I use." Looking at Gryffindor's confident look, John held back for a long time before saying, "Then what? The sword you're talking about is not Gryffindor's sword, is it?" Of course, that sword was Gryffindor's favorite, and he specially asked the Goblin King to make a powerful sword. John wanted to cry, but after so long, it turned out to be the sword of Gryffindor. "That thing is good, but it's in Dumbledore's hands. You can't grab the sword yourself, can you?" He's not Harry, so he wanted to rebel if he snatched the sword of Gryffindor. He now feels that Gryffindor is really a pit. He had no choice but to say, "I've seen that sword before, it's in the hands of Principal Dumbledore." Okay, Gryffindor was taken aback for a moment. He recalled that he seemed to have indeed given the sword to Hogwarts for safekeeping. Seeing John's resentful expression, Gryffindor was embarrassed. "How about I teach you to forge it yourself?" Regardless of Gryffindor's carefree appearance, his casting skills are actually very powerful. As compensation for Gryffindor's sword, Gryffindor's wand waved, and the surrounding scene changed again. What appeared this time was not a forest or a mountain, but a comfortable room. This is the room where Gryffindor lived, also known as the Chamber of Secrets. Inside is all the knowledge he left behind, which is the most precious legacy. Chapter 59, Changing Neville and the Mad Girl. You are listening at novelfull.audio. I hope you can treat this place well and become an excellent and kind wizard at the same time. Although the lion is powerful, it also needs companions. You are very powerful, but I hope you can help more people. Gryffindor's body was shedding sawdust one by one. John came to his senses when he saw this, and asked, "Are you leaving?" "Son, I'm already dead, and this is just a little bit of my soul left." Gryffindor saw a face with a red beard where the sawdust fell. He looked at John kindly and said, "I see the future of the wizarding world from you. You have powerful talents." "Thank you, head of Gryffindor." John sincerely thanked the other party. Although he had not known each other for a long time, the strength and generosity of this Gryffindor were impressive. When the sawdust was about to dissipate completely, Gryffindor, who left his mouth open, thought of something. He cursed, "That broken hat, there must be something wrong to assign you to Slytherin." Well, if Gryffindor hadn't died early, he probably wanted to throw the sorting hat into the water and wash it to see if it had accumulated dust on its brain. John touched his nose in embarrassment. He didn't know what the sorting hat was thinking. Anyway, he was already in Slytherin, and John didn't have much opinion. Gryffindor disappeared, and the training ground became a cozy room. He picked up a book that recorded Gryffindor's casting. This was very helpful to John, and John also saw something like a cheat book. That's Gryffindor's magic swordsmanship. After reading this book, John realized how lucky he was to win. As long as you give Gryffindor a sword, you have to lose and call your father. Putting the book in his pocket, John felt that he could learn from it. John stuffed the bread into his mouth with some lack of sleep. It was already midnight after dealing with the 3 tests yesterday. On the way back, he bumped into his dean catching Yiyu, but fortunately he escaped with the illusion spell. "Neville, perhaps you should resist." Seeing that Neville's cheeks were swollen into 2 meat buns, John lifted the curse for him. "Thank you, John, I would, too, but I'm too weak." Without thinking about it, he knew that Malfoy did it. John couldn't correct Malfoy for a while. He looked at Neville with a hint of temptation in his voice. "Neville, do you want to become stronger?" "Become stronger?" "Yes. Make you strong enough not to be bullied by anyone." John's serious expression showed Neville that he meant it. Thinking of being bullied by Malfoy and the appearance of his parents, Neville met those eyes and asked hesitantly, "What should I do?" After class in the afternoon, go to the Whomping Willow and wait for me. John glanced at the time. Class was about to start. He got up after finishing the bread in 2 or 3 bites. When passing by Neville, John patted him on the shoulder and said seriously, "Neville, you are definitely not a mediocre person, you just haven't realized how strong you are." Neville watched John leave blankly. During class, Neville kept thinking of John's words. He was a little distracted, and Professor Flitwick found out. In the afternoon, John walked out of the classroom after class. In the Transfiguration class, he successfully completed the transformation of a beetle into an exquisite button. For him who already has level 3 Transfiguration, this level is simply too simple. Gryffindor's legacy gave him 3 random points, and now he's left with 2 points after being used by Transfiguration. Although he really wanted to use the transformation technique directly, it was obvious that he couldn't continue to upgrade at the moment. He had no choice but to leave any point. First, before heading to the Whomping Willow, he meets Daphne. "John, are you going to Quidditch?" Daphne walked beside John, and her little sister Pansy left early very wisely. John was taken aback when he heard the words, and heard Daphne say mysteriously, "Draco's father donated a batch of new broomsticks to the Quidditch team. You flew very well in the 1st grade, maybe you can go to try Quidditch." "I'm interested, but I don't have enough time for other activities." Unexpectedly, Malfoy would donate money to go through the back door. John couldn't help shaking his head. How unconfident he was in himself. The previous Seeker on the Slytherin Quidditch team has left and the Seeker position is vacant. Even if Malfoy doesn't donate money, it is still possible to become a Seeker with his flying level. In the final analysis, moneyism is at work, and perhaps going in like this can make Malfoy quickly become the core position. When Daphne heard that John wasn't interested, she stopped talking about Quidditch and turned to the new defense against the dark arts professor. Originally, she thought that this would be a powerful wizard, but after yesterday's class, she recognized Lockhart's true colors. "I told my mum and she didn't believe it. It was too bad." Daphne complained in John's ear, and John nodded in agreement from time to time. Suddenly, Daphne changed the subject and said, "I think it's better to let John take over as a substitute. At least we won't be pulled by the elf." John just smiled when he heard the words. No matter how hard the school would let a student teach defense against the dark arts, he just took it as Daphne's complaint and didn't take it to heart. After parting ways with Daphne on the 1st floor, John went to the Whomping Willow. At the Whomping Willow, before John saw Neville, he saw a little girl first. The little girl seemed to be looking for something near the Whomping Willow, and John reminded, "I think you should get out of there. The Whomping Willow will blow you away." The little girl stopped when she heard the sound. She turned around and said in an ethereal voice, "I'm looking for the horned snoring beast. It's a cowardly creature." John stopped to look at the girl, and couldn't help showing a strange expression to her weird dress, Ravenclaw robes, a necklace of butterbeer corks, and strange earrings. John didn't say anything. He stepped forward and said, "Curved horned snoring beast. I haven't seen it around here. My name is John Wick." "Hello." "Hi John Wick, my name is Luna Lovegood." The two shook hands as they knew each other. John looked at Luna, who had tousled, waist-length, dirty blonde hair. There were also dreamy-looking, bulging gray eyes with pale eyebrows. Coupled with that outfit, it reveals a kind of madness. "Are you a freshman in Ravenclaw?" "Yes, I know you, John of Slytherin." Luna's ethereal voice seemed to sing, and John shrugged at her words and said, "Hope is a good thing. Except for the strange dress, this girl is fine." At least John is comfortable chatting with her. Pour today's dragon dung on the Whomping Willow, and John keeps the Whomping Willow in place for a longer time. He cut some branches and leaves from the Whomping Willow, and when he passed below, he found a secret path. "What's this for?" Luna leaned over. There seemed little doubt about how long John would be able to hold the Whomping Willow in place. Of course John knew, he had seen it on the Marauder's map, and said casually, "Maybe it leads to a haunted house." This is the secret passage leading to the Shrieking Shack, and John has an urge to go in and take a look, but he thought of making an appointment with Neville, so he had to wait. After waiting for a while, John saw Neville, who was running out of breath. "Sorry John, I didn't realize until I got back to my dorm." Neville put his hands on his knees and bent over to breathe. He saw a girl next to John, and he was a little nervous. John introduced, this is Luna Lovegood, a freshman in Ravenclaw. Hello. Luna greeted. Neville didn't know whether it was because of running or shyness, his face turned red. Hello, my name is Neville Longbottom. After the two got to know each other, John looked towards the secret passage under the Whomping Willow, and smiled kindly at Neville. Then let's start the first training. Train. Yes, it makes you stronger. John led the way, Neville followed, and Luna followed for some reason. When they came to the Whomping Willow, Neville looked at the dark hole with some fear. John patted him on the shoulder and said relaxedly, "Relax, there will be no ghosts. No, after all, maybe Peeves lives here." When Peeves was mentioned, Neville suddenly felt a little bad. Unable to resist him, John let him go in front and himself behind. Luna followed in. She was full of curiosity about all this. The passage was very dark, and Neville was very scared. Seeing that he had forgotten to use the illuminating charm, John had to remind him. Neville tried a few times nervously before he succeeded. With the lights on, he seemed less afraid. Chapter 60 The Boggart and the Stargazers. You are listening at novelfull.audio. The passage was narrow and cramped, and the three of them walked in a single file. Where did this go? The further Neville walked, the more frightened he was. If John hadn't been behind, he would have wanted to go back. John said casually, "A haunted house." What? Hearing it was a haunted house, Neville stopped. John patted him on the back and said, "Don't worry, it's me." Neville really wanted to say that even with you, it would be scary. Luna said as if singing, "There are ghosts in Hogwarts, aren't there?" Of the three, only Neville seemed to be afraid, which made Neville hate his own cowardice. He mustered up the courage to move on, and finally walked through the passage and came to a house. It was a messy, grey room. The wallpaper was peeling, the floor was stained, the furniture was all broken, as if it had been smashed, and the windows were boarded up. It looked exactly like the haunted house I remembered, and the peeling wallpaper seemed to be torn apart by something terrible. Makes people shudder. John felt that Luna was getting closer to him. He forgot that he had the blessing of the night devil and didn't need lights, but Luna was different. Lumos. The glow of the wand makes people feel safe. The house was dark and dark. John wanted to exercise Neville, so he said, "Let's take a look separately." Neville swallowed, looking at the house exuding a strange atmosphere. He still mustered up the courage to walk over. John saw him passing by. While he watched from the side, this house has been abandoned for a long time, and it is not difficult to see some luxurious styles from the dilapidated furniture inside. John pushed open a wooden door, which creaked in disrepair. Luna walked in curiously, and there was no fear in her eyes. This weird girl trusted John very much in less than a day. It looks like a kitchen with a tree outside. Through the gaps in the nailed planks, you can see the shadows of swaying trees outside. The timid may not be able to stay here for long. We're going to Neville Longbottom, he should be frightened. Luna was always able to see through a person clearly, and John thought about it for a while, and it might not be very friendly to Neville. He turned around and went to look for Neville, but he hadn't found Neville yet. John heard Neville's voice of fear. "Professor Snape, I didn't mean to." "No need to explain, Neville Longbottom, because of you, Gryffindor was deducted 100 points. Professor Snape's voice was ruthless. Gryffindor was deducted 100 points because of himself. Neville couldn't imagine how he would be scolded by his classmates. He covered his head in fear as Professor Snape approached him step by step. John felt something was wrong after hearing it outside. Even if Professor Snape liked to deduct points, he would not deduct penalties like this, deducting 100 points. This punishment can only be made by the president of the hospital. He suddenly realized that this Professor Snape might be a fake. When Professor Snape wanted to get closer to Neville, John kicked the door straight in. Stupefied. The red light hit Professor Snape and sent him flying into the cabinet. Pointing at the other party with his wand, John said calmly, "Who are you?" "No, John, you'll be fired for doing that." Neville couldn't imagine John attacking the professor. It frightened him. John stared at that Professor Snape. When Professor Snape saw John, his body turned into a messy black shadow. After spinning for a while, a plate of stargazing pies just out of the oven fell to the ground, and Professor Snape just disappeared. "This is, let alone John." Even Neville was stunned. When John saw the stargazing pie with 4 dead fish heads stuck in the pie, he suddenly had a distressed expression on his face. The dark cuisine of the British Empire made him very uncomfortable. Transforms, and in a dark place. Is this a Boggart? After recalling for a moment, John remembered a magical creature. I remember that Boggarts will become something that others are afraid of. I can understand that Neville is afraid of Professor Snape, but I am afraid of the Stargazers. After a moment of silence, John stared at the pie, suddenly remembering that he was running a clemency all the time. Perhaps it is because of this that Boggart has become a dark dish that he hates. He was speechless, and glanced at the cabinet. Boggarts like to be in dark and cramped places. He went up and kicked Stargazing Pie back into the cabinet, then swung his wand to lock the cabinet. Neville is fine. That's a Boggart. What were you thinking just now? Why did you become Professor Snape? John had a strange look on his face. Although it was no secret that Neville was afraid of Professor Snape, it was really scary that you could still think of Snape in this environment. Neville was a little embarrassed. He hesitated, and said, I remembered that I was deducted points last year, and I also thought that Professor Snape might be waiting in the room to deduct my points. Well, it's hard for the kid. In the first grade, he was caught deducting points for notifying Harry, which made him have a psychological shadow on the point deductions, but it is Professor McGonagall who deducted points. Why do you think it is Professor Snape ambushing here? John glanced at Luna. This girl didn't know the danger of things yet. She just thought that Boggarts were very interesting and would turn into a fish pie. Well, it looks like our adventure has come to an end for today. It was getting dark outside, and there was still a first grader here, so John decided it was better not to be a bad guy and lead people on night tours. The three returned along the passage, and on the way out, Neville was almost hit by the Whomping Willow. John quickly pulled him back with sharp eyesight, and then fixed the Whomping Willow. Back in the castle, the three parted ways. Thank you, John. Today's adventure was very interesting. Luna was in a good mood. Her voice was ethereal as if she was singing. There are many interesting places in Hogwarts, if you are interested. John waved goodbye to Luna, and he had to go to the room of requirement for training. During training, John thought of Neville. Maybe you can pick a better weapon for Neville. This is the Sword Master of Gryffindor, the existence of killing Horcruxes with one sword. John felt that if a Juggernaut didn't use a sword, what kind of Juggernaut would he be called? He found some materials, and they don't need to be too fine, as long as they roughly have the shape of a sword. With John's current level of alchemy and Gryffindor's casting skills, a sword can be completed soon. It is much rougher than Ironwick's sword, but it is a very good training tool for Neville. Early the next morning, John sent Neville there. Neville didn't know why, so John said meaningfully, is there a possibility that you said, in fact, you are a sword master? Neville was stunned and didn't know what to say, but John encouraged him to learn the sword hard and strive to become a great sword master in the future. Hermione held Lockhart's book to read, and even after a lesson from Lockhart, she still didn't give up, which made John admire Hermione's perseverance. The fangirl filter is really scary. I hope she sees through Lockhart's true colors as soon as possible. After finishing breakfast, John went to class, and today he has a potions class from his headmaster. If I was late, I didn't want to accept Professor Snape's death stare. I have earned so many points, why do I feel that he is still so unfriendly to me? John didn't understand Professor Snape a little bit. Although he said he started fighting in school, it wouldn't make you hold grudges for so long. He met Malfoy on the way, and Malfoy told him to wait and see how he humiliated the Gryffindor group on Saturday. His dad sponsors the entire team of Nimbus 2001, a broom that is more advanced than Porter's Nimbus 2000. As for the garbage of other people in Gryffindor, let alone the Comet and sweeping 7-star series, it would be difficult to sweep the floor at home. Malfoy seemed to see the day when he led Slytherin to win the trophy, which made John ashamed to tell him that with Harry around. This dream might be difficult. Who let others be the protagonist?